that it is highly likely that Washington and New York will be destroyed by India in the very near future. It will seek to destroy India with thousands of nuclear warheads before India destroys Washington and New York. And there are other possibilities that I'll come to. The United States admits to having about 5,000 deployed nuclear warheads and an even larger number of in storage, which are a few turns of a screwdriver away from being deployed. And you can be sure that those screwdrivers are whirling furiously. Although, like India, the United States can destroy a few targets in India with a warning that India will be totally obliterated with thousands of nuclear warheads if India explodes any of its nuclear warheads in US cities. It will not do so. Instead, it will attack with thousands of nuclear warheads in the first instance, hoping that there'll be no one left in India able or willing to trigger the warheads and placed in US cities. And why is that? Because even if the United States uh, targets India's nuclear forces, it knows where its launchers are, where its nuclear warheads are stored and deployed. And it attacks just those places like Hyderabad, where some of the defense research installations are, and some other specific places. If it seeks to just destroy India's ability to use its nuclear warheads. In this situation, it will not work because India's nuclear warheads are emplaced. They are already in place in US cities, including Washington and New York, and they can be triggered from anywhere in India or from anywhere in the world. A signal from a satellite can trigger them, and if someone's in a forest, somewhere in India, can trigger them, can send a signal to trigger them. So simply destroying India's nuclear warheads that it knows, where they are located in India, and India's defense installations, etc., will not work because India's nuclear warheads are emplaced, already in place in American cities, including Washington and New York. And they can be triggered from anywhere in the world by just one person. So, the so-called counterforce strategy, trying to destroy India's ability to launch a nuclear strike on the United States, will not work because India doesn't have to send its nuclear warheads to the United States. They are already there. Okay. All it has to do is send a signal to trigger them, and that signal can be sent from anywhere. Uh, so if India triggers its nuclear warheads and placed in Washington and New York before the United States destroys India with thousands of nuclear warheads, with a warning that additional US cities will be destroyed if there is any retaliation, India will have destroyed Washington and New York now without itself suffering a single casualty. And it can destroy the United States coast to coast 5 years later. But let's leave that out. Let's just stay with what India can do right now, that is, destroy Washington and New York now without itself suffering a single casualty. If India does not destroy Washington and New York before the United States destroys India with thousands of nuclear warheads, or does something else, I'll come to that, then the United States will have destroyed India with thousands of nuclear warheads to destroy India's ability to destroy a single US city. So unless India destroys Washington and New York first, with a warning that additional US cities will be destroyed if there is any retaliation, and this warning can be implicit. The United States already knows this because I've said this, dozens of times, many dozens of times in my press releases, that this is what will happen. Uh, So the United States may offer to disband the CIA, pull out of Afghanistan immediately, do various things to delay India's destroying of Washington and New York. But it will go ahead with a surprise attack with thousands of nuclear warheads on India, or do something else. Uh, no matter what India says or does, by way of assurances to the United States that it is satisfied and it will not destroy Washington, New York. In because for one thing, since the warheads, Indian warheads, nuclear warheads, are already in place in American cities, and no assurance has any meaning because those warheads, all they need is a signal to trigger them. So those assurances don't have any meaning. Um, and I've said that in conventional warfare, the element of surprise may give one side an edge. In this situation, it makes the difference between destroying the enemy without yourself suffering a single casualty or being destroyed without the enemy suffering a single casualty. For India, it means triggering its warheads in Washington and New York before the United States triggers its warheads. And for the United States, it means triggering its warheads before India triggers its warheads. So triggering India's nuclear warheads to destroy the enemy has to be done without delay or dawdling, because otherwise the enemy may carry out a first strike on India. And since the traitor regime in New Delhi remains in place, do something else. For example, with its special forces teams that it has laid down, quote unquote, in India, as a US admiral recently disclosed in congressional testimony, to the US Congress. And since the enemy holds India in slavery, though this fact is covered up, I have attached a file hundreds of times to my press releases showing the case of Brahmaniam and the CIA director Michael Hayden coming online, offering to transfer 1 crore rupees into my bank account within 48 hours if I agreed to work with them. That was, I believe, August 10 or August 9, 2008. Uh, uh, a case of Brahman was the architect of India's nuclear doctrine. So these traitors are the architects of India's nuclear doctrine. So since the enemy already holds India in slavery, it is meaningless to talk of deterring the United States. Forget the word deterrence. The task is to destroy and not deter the United States by triggering India's nuclear warheads in Washington and New York and New Delhi. Because believe me, the people in New Delhi are so ferociously loyal to the Americans, you wouldn't believe. With a warning that additional cities will be destroyed. American cities will be destroyed if there is any retaliation. And to repeat, in conventional warfare, the element of surprise may give one side an edge. In this situation, it makes the difference between destroying the enemy without yourself suffering a single casualty or being destroyed without the enemy suffering a single casualty. So the main ingredient, the crucial ingredient for victory is to trigger your warheads first before the enemy has any chance to do anything. Okay. And as I've said, destroying the enemy by triggering the warheads in Washington and New York should be a professional, happy act performed in an instant. No need to agonize over it. And the best time to trigger them is on a working day during working hours in Washington and New York between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Washington and New York time. Although other days and times are also good. And I've said that the nuclear destruction of Washington and New York, even if the actual yields of the Indian nuclear warheads exploded in these two cities is just 20 kilotons in each city rather than 200 kilotons or 500 kilotons. Because if India has emplaced 10 warheads of 500 kilotons each in New York and something similar in Washington, their total yield will be 5 megatons. But suppose, since the Indian nuclear warheads haven't been tested adequately, if the actual yield is a small fraction of that, and the total yield of Indian nuclear warheads exploding in New York is just 20 kilotons in New York and say 20 kilotons in Washington, uh, even that will immediately make India the supreme power in the world, because it will be accompanied with a warning that additional US cities will be destroyed with nuclear warheads already emplaced in them if there is any retaliation. So the most important thing is to trigger India's nuclear warheads without delay, without delay.